Control to base. He's in position and ready to move out.
The North has always fancied itself a player, Control. Well, let's put that to the test. It's time the world witnesses what they can do when provoked into action. I'm bringing them into the game.
Hell of a way to start. Moving out!
Cover shooters are a dime a dozen nowadays, but kill.switch really paved the way for how they are, and included a lot of innovations that are pretty fresh even for today. To me, it feels like a predecessor to Spec Ops The Line, both in terms of gameplay and in terms of story. It had been on my to-play list for a while now, but now that I've finally gotten around to beating it, I can wholeheartedly recommend it. I'm going to break down why it's not only a spiritual predecessor to Spec Ops in gameplay, but in the story aspects.
So much for peace in the Middle East. Base, this is Control. I've got the prototype at the extraction point. Initiating system shutdown.
This turned out much better than I expected. How did it feel?
Like I was playing a video game.
How appropriate. War at the push of a button.
You want him to stay down here a bit longer? I could always go for a new high score.
We've done sufficient damage for now, Control.
So from the start, kill.switch is sort of a modern and sci-fi third-person cover shooter, set in a world similar to ours, but with some sort of unknown conflict brewing. You play as Bishop, a guy being controlled by an unknown party for sinister purposes. And half the game involves him going to different hotspots around the world and causing chaos, and the other half is him trying to rectify the problems he created and bring down the conspiracy that was controlling him. For a cover shooter, it plays a lot like Spec Ops and other games to that degree, though it does have some unique aspects to it. You get into gunfights with enemies, you take cover, you can hide, crouch, lean out, blind fire, bash enemies, dive for cover. There are a lot of movement options. This is a game that came out in 2003 and it still feels pretty fresh to play. Its health is also unique in that you take damage and it reduces both your potential health and your current health, where you can regenerate part of your health, the potential health, but your current health can be depleted quicker, so it encourages you to get out of the line of fire. Kill.switch is also unique in that there's no real weapon limit. You can pick up whatever you want and carry it around for the rest of the mission setting. There are about 5 missions in total. 1 in the Middle East, 1 in the Caspian Sea, 1 in North Korea, 1 in a South American temple, and 1 in a North American dockyard and base. The locations are pretty unique, and the enemies are pretty smart, especially for, again, a 2003 era game. The enemies are quick to get into cover, they can blind fire like you, they will try to flank you. Sometimes they throw grenades, though not too often, honestly. And they know how to keep the pressure on you. It doesn't get a lot of spotlight sometimes because enemies go down quickly. Usually only a couple body shots can put them down for good, and a headshot does almost every enemy in. The tricky thing is that you also go down very quickly. That's one of the big things that sets kill.switch apart. This is a hard game. It does not pull any punches throughout its duration. You can go down pretty quickly in the open. It doesn't take much even for a single enemy to kill you. And to top that off, the levels have no checkpoints. Now the missions are broken up into different levels, and each level lets you carry the gear and health and grenades from the previous level. So if you've picked up a bunch of sticky grenades and flash grenades from a previous level, you can use them in the next one. This also means that if you don't have a ton of health from the previous level, that'll carry over to the next, but Usually levels are good about giving you a chance to restock or making things light until the next health pickup. It encourages you to both play aggressively and to play smart, in that you're going to need to be on the offensive with enemies, constantly flushing them out of cover with grenades, using the chance to lean out or blind fire to take them down and whittle down their numbers, or pulling back a bit to get some distance so you can better land shots. It's a challenge, and it's a rewarding one. It feels good to take down enemies, and for the most part, the deaths feel fair when you do get them.
They called you a super soldier. Some people are easily impressed.
There are some pretty cheap moments where the game will just throw an enemy through a doorway, have him carry a shotgun and take you down in a couple of shots. But most of the time, if it feels like if you died, it was because of your own missteps. And in a way, it is sort of tying into the themes of the game to have you die at a certain point and relive that experience, but do it again correctly this time. Weapon arsenal's pretty nice too. It's your standard fare. You've got a bunch of different AKs, an M4, an underbarrel grenade launcher, an M1 shotgun, and a sniper rifle, in addition to a couple MP5 variants, along with a mounted turret, though enemies usually use mounted turrets instead of you. One thing I do like is that this has iron sights and scopes. Depending on which weapon you're using, you can either zoom in with a scope to get a better shot at an enemy, or use a weapon's iron sights to try to get more precise hits. I found it especially helpful on the PS2 version, which is the one I did a playthrough of. I know there's also a PC build of the game that's out there, but I've never played that version of it, honestly. The enemy variety is not that deep, but the enemies are intelligent enough to make up for it, and the guns they carry set them apart pretty well anyway, so it's not something I split hairs over. Now that we've talked about the gameplay basics and some of the stuff I liked about it, you can probably see some parallels to Spec Ops. I mean, Spec Ops is also a cover shooter. It has some levels set in the Middle East, while Spec Ops has an entire campaign set in Dubai. There are elements of moral grayness, there are twists about who the real hero of the story is, but it has to be more than just a cover shooter to really embody the feeling of Spec Ops, and that's where the deeper plot comes in. Because for the first half of the game, right up to the end of the North Korea missions, your mission control is a guy named Archer, and you are technically playing as a guy called the Controller, who is a sociopathic asshole who doesn't care how much damage he causes to the world as long as he can have some fun controlling Bishop and just mowing down people. In the tutorial, he even compares controlling Bishop to playing a video game. There's definitely some commentary there about dehumanization and about how it's just fun to mow down baddies without a second thought. And hey, I'm guilty of that. I have a blast playing games that have just mindless killing. I played Left 4 Dead 2 shortly before recording this, and I didn't care about the zombies I had capped. But it's fun to think about, like, the casualties you're causing and the damage you would be causing within the game's world.
Death is my talent, the same as your boy here. He was one of yours, wasn't he?
Another time, Control. The mission is simple. Get in, destroy the oil rig, and get out.
Anything else?
Do what you do best. Think like a gun.
Because initially, you don't realize that you're the bad guy. It makes it a little ambiguous. When you're fighting in the Middle East levels, the opening levels, it seems like it could be taken on like a terrorist or a militia of some kind. The game doesn't give you a lot of context, aside from you needing to assassinate a general. You might think it's like, oh, some Saddam Hussein guy, or some equivalent of a dictator. But then you get to the end of the level, and the end of the mission, and the Controller jokes about there being no more peace in the Middle East. And then you get to the next level, which is in the Caspian Sea on this oil rig. And it really starts hitting home that you're causing more problems. Like, These aren't evil people. These are just soldiers guarding an oil rig. It's not an evil oil rig, or they aren't carrying hostages there like in that one Modern Warfare 2 mission. It's just an ordinary oil rig that Archer and the Controller are trying to blow up to cause worldwide instability. And this especially goes for the North Korea mission, where you're trying to steal nerve agents and launch a warhead from a North Korean base to kick off a false flag operation. The plot goes into some pretty crazy territory near the end, though the twists were grounded and I end up liking the way it turned out. I won't spoil everything because I would highly recommend experiencing it yourself, but it lays just enough groundwork for everything to add up and for all the little hints at the beginning of the game to pay off. There are hints of a sequel in a post-credits scene, but they aren't followed up on. There haven't been any sequels or any continuations to the story that I know of, and that's fine. It's not a pressing thing. The story ends on a pretty strong note. I felt like it wrapped itself up nicely by the end. Something I do want to critique is that the difficulty can feel a little artificial. I've touched on this previously, but there are some just downright unfair bits in the game. I think the worst part was the final boss battle, which is just a slog. You can die almost immediately after kicking it off. The only relief is that it's its own level within the final mission, so you can basically restart it right after you die. You'll just have to listen to the final taunts of the final boss every time you lose it. That isn't until you realize the way to cheese it, to retreat further back right after the boss spawns and just pick him off with any of the other guns, whittle down his health that way. I wouldn't normally recommend cheesing strategies, but it's not a fair fight. It's extremely lopsided, and it's just too frustrating. I don't mind venting about that. But every game has its faults. Kill Switch lasts about 5 hours roughly, give or take. I say that's a fair length. Some people would say that it's too short, and I can understand that to some degree. There isn't really a replay value with Kill Switch. There isn't, like, a pickup minigame. There aren't collectibles, intelligence, anything of that sort. There isn't multiplayer. The only other campaign option is just playing it on a harder difficulty. And frankly, the regular campaign was hard enough as it was, so I didn't really feel a strong desire to get back into that. It was enjoyable, though. I liked the different locations. I liked how there were different combat scenarios that occurred based on the level designs. Like how there are more open-ended fights in the oil rig and the temple, but the Middle East levels have more close-quarter urban combat. And I also liked how the story really played with your sense of right and wrong, and kind of left you eager to see what would happen next, to get another taste of what this game's world was like. It was pretty inventive, and I liked the hints of what all had happened prior to the game and how they had influenced the game's events. And the whole subversive story about Archer and the Controller was pretty clever too. It's not as insane as the stuff in Spec Ops, but this was a more subtle touch kind of approach. It doesn't fault the player for any of the actions committed by Bishop, but it does question how much fun should be really had in just gunning down people who are trying to protect innocent people and defend ordinary things like oil rigs and leading politicians. And food for thought is always welcome.
There's no doubt the North will retaliate against the West. And soon, the game will begin again on my terms.
The soundtrack's kind of neat too. It's a product of the early to mid 2000s, kind of a techno Ratchet and Clank vibe. I don't really know if there were any particular song names in it, but it was a fun thing to listen to. It provided a contrast to the gritty guitar of the Spec Ops soundtrack. It felt a little more heroic, which was very fitting as well, since in the end Bishop does redeem himself, and he does prove himself to be a hero. And I think that it's a good game overall. Kill Switch has a lot to offer, and it's a shame it's kind of gone forgotten. I'd highly recommend it, especially if you enjoyed Spec Ops, both for the gameplay and for the story. It's not going to go into like the mind-blowing hallucinations or the crazy war crimes of Spec Ops, but there are definitely questionable actions committed, and the story does have some pretty deep twists that will catch you off guard, even with the stuff I've given away in this. So I'd recommend giving Kill Switch a shot. I know it's on consoles. The PC build is, from what I understand, pretty much abandonware at this point, and it might need some fixes, because I don't think it works on systems for Windows Vista and above. That said, I would still recommend giving it a shot, even if you have to get through some hurdles to get it working. It's a good game that really pioneered the cover shooter genre, and it shouldn't go forgotten. It deserves to be recognized for the influence it had. Directly influenced stuff like Gears of War and Uncharted, in fact, and I wouldn't be surprised if it influenced Spec Ops in some way, even indirectly. So, thanks for watching. Hope you guys give Kill Switch a shot. Take care.